They laughed when I packed my bags, but had no idea where I was really going. Nora Bennett sat quietly at her usual spot behind the circulation desk of the Elmwood Public Library, the soft fluorescent lights humming overhead. Outside, snowflakes danced lazily down onto the sleepy Wisconsin town, blanketing the streets in fragile white. She pressed her lips together, her fingers tracing the worn leather strap of her faded old duffel bag resting beside her. It was packed with care, not with souvenirs or everyday things, but with the seeds of a dream no one in Elmwood seemed to take seriously. Her coworkers bustled by, laughing about weekend plans and latest gossip, barely sparing her a glance. Nora's chest tightened as she overheard whispers. "Still talking about that grad program, huh? You sure you're ready for the city? This is cozy little Elmwood. We don't need library assistants chasing big city fantasies." The usual smirks and eye rolls came from behind library shelves, where these words lingered like cold drafts. She glanced toward Janine, the manager with a sharp tongue, who was surrounded by a small crowd. Nora had barely mentioned anything when Janine dismissed her hopes as fanciful nonsense. But today felt different. Today Nora had decided she was going to voice it aloud. "Guys, I'm taking a week off next month," Nora said softly, careful to keep her voice steady. "I'm applying for graduate school, rare book conservation," she added, flipping a page of a battered catalog. Silence settled briefly. Then a stifled chuckle from Jeff, the senior librarian, cut through the space. "Right, Nora. Sure. What's next? Traveling to find a lost library? You'd better pack warm gloves for those dusty old pages," he joked, his smirk barely hiding the ridicule. At once, others laughed, a low ripple growing in confidence. Nora's cheeks burned, the weight of decades of whispered doubts settling heavy on her shoulders. Her duffel bag felt suddenly too small to carry the hope she'd curled into it. "You're just going away for another boring weekend," murmured Pauline from the fiction section, her eyes shiny with amusement. "We all know you don't do anything exciting." She bit her lip, swallowing the sting as the laughter grew louder. Hands awkwardly fumbling, Nora zipped the bag closed. She avoided meeting anyone's eyes, feeling every sarcastic glance track her like a spotlight turned harsh and unforgiving. Her breath caught in her throat when Mia, her closest friend at work, stepped near. Mia's eyes flickered with unease, caught between loyalty and fear of joining the crowd. "Nora, are you sure? It's a big step," Mia whispered, voice trembling slightly. "I know," Nora replied, voice barely a whisper, "but I have to try." As she gathered her things, she noticed the heavy stares and strained smiles of those who still didn't believe. In that moment, she was not just a quiet face behind the desk. She was someone with a fragile, burning spark. A spark she had hidden beneath years of silenced dreams and underestimated potential. The library clock chimed softly, marking the end of the day's shift. Nora shouldered her duffel bag with newfound resolve, stepping into the chilly twilight that blurred the edges of familiar streets. With every breath of the crisp air, she felt the quiet tightening inside her chest, the mounting tension of what was to come. They might laugh now, but Nora carried far more than a suitcase. She was carrying her courage, and no matter how many times they whispered she wouldn't, she was ready to prove them wrong. The library's fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as Nora's fingers trembled around the strap of her aged duffel bag. The once bustling room had dimmed since the morning rush, the soft rustle of pages and distant footsteps echoing faintly along the rows of dusty tomes. She had barely announced her plan to take a few days off when Janine, her manager, swept past the front desk with a sneer that cut sharper than any cold Wisconsin winter wind. "So, Nora," Janine's voice dripped with faux amusement, loud enough for half the staff to hear. "Heading off to some grand adventure, are we? Maybe you'll hit the jackpot at bingo night. Finally spice up your quiet little life." She flicked her eyes toward the break room, where several coworkers were already smirking, their lunch trays forgotten. Nora's cheeks burned fiercely. The faint hope she'd clung to was unraveling in that moment, unraveling under ridicule. She stammered, "It's just a few days for some study and research." Janine raised an eyebrow. Research? Please. Nora, you barely manage the catalog reviews here, and now you're aiming for the stars? This library isn't Harvard. Mia, sitting at a corner table, shifted uncomfortably, but kept silent. The others, emboldened, pulled out their phones. A chorus of whispered laughter rippled through the room as they snapped photos of Nora's duffel, her hesitant packing, her flushed face trying to hide behind a curtain of brown hair. "I mean, look at her," one coworker muttered under her breath, as another sent the pictures into their group chat with emojis that stung more than words could. The low hum of derision swelled, quiet yet suffocating. Nora's hands clenched the strap tighter, nails digging into her skin, but she refused to let the tears fall. The library's familiar scent of aging paper and polished wood turned bitter in her mouth. Janine's laughter rang out again, sharp and deliberate. "Go get 'em, bingo queen. Maybe you can win a date or two while you're at it." A ringing silence swallowed the room after that, broken only by the scrape of Nora's chair as she stood. She gathered her things slowly, each movement measured, determined not to give her tormentors the satisfaction of watching her break. As she passed Janine on the way out, Nora's voice was quiet, but firm enough to cut through the lingering giggles. "This isn't about bingo. I'm going to Boston for a conservation seminar, the kind your narrow mind will never understand." The words felt foreign, forced, but they gave her a spark of warmth amid the chill. The sting of humiliation was fresh and raw, yet beneath it, a seed of resolve took root, quiet, strong, impossible to ignore. Mia caught up with her once she reached the hallway. "Nora, I'm sorry about Janine. They don't see what you're capable of." Nora managed a tight smile. "Thank you, Mia. Maybe it's time they start." As she stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, the laughter echoed faintly behind her. But Nora inhaled deeply, tasting the sharp edge of hope mingling with the scent of fallen leaves, ready to prove them all wrong. Have you ever faced a moment when everyone's doubt felt unbearable? What kept you moving forward when the laughter surrounded you? A walk home stretched longer than usual, the cold October wind swirling yellow and crimson leads across the worn sidewalks of the small Wisconsin town. Nora pulled her coat tighter, the faded fabric doing little to fend off the sharp bite in the air or the sting crawling up her throat. Her mind replayed the scene at the library over and over. Janine's mocking laughter, the low murmur of snickering coworkers, and the phone flashes capturing her humiliation like some twisted trophy. She glanced down at her rumpled application packet tucked inside her duffel bag, the edges bent and creased from her trembling hands. With a shaky breath, she debated whether to tear it up right there on the cracked pavement. What was the point? Maybe they were right. This was just a frivolous daydream destined to fade beneath the weight of their disbelief. But then, her phone buzzed in her pocket, a brief, unscripted message from Dr. Klein, the advisor at the Rare Book Conservation Program. "Keep going. Your passion shows. We believe in your potential." The words didn't erase the sting, but a faint flicker of warmth stirred within, a fragile ember beneath the cold ash of doubt. She scanned the message again as she neared her small rental apartment, but setbacks introduced themselves like unwelcome shadows. Her reference letter, promised weeks ago by her former professor, still hadn't arrived. Her carefully filled out forms had been lost in the mail, she feared. And then there were the texts from her brother, Ezra, laced with sarcasm and thinly veiled disbelief. "Still chasing fairy tales, Nora? Boston? What, to dust old books? Ha!" Her fingers clenched the phone until her knuckles whitened. The words echoed louder than the rustling leaves, feeding insecurities she had worked so hard to suppress. Inside, her apartment was quiet but cluttered, stacks of well-thumbed novels crowding the shelves. She sank into the worn armchair by the window, the fading light casting shadows across her face. For a moment, her fingers hovered over the submit button on the online application. Could she face another rejection? Another round of whispered pity or outright dismissal? Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but alongside the doubt, a stubborn seed of hope rooted deeper still. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to herself that her dreams deserved a chance, that her quiet voice held value beyond the cramped walls of this tiny town. Her phone chimed again, another message from Dr. Klein, a simple encouragement. You belong in this. Don't stop now. Nora's lips pressed into a determined line. She exhaled slowly, steadying her hands, and with a final glance at the window where the city's lights began to pepper the dusk, she clicked submit. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering a few forgotten leaves across the pavement. The future was uncertain, riddled with obstacles, some visible, others like whispered doubts that clung stubbornly to her skin. But as Nora closed her eyes against the chill, a quiet resolve settled deep within her. What do you hold on to when the world doubts your dreams? How do you find the strength when failure seems just one step away? Friday afternoon settled over the small Wisconsin town as the library's fluorescent lights flickered, mingling uneasily with the soft hum of lunchtime chatter. The break room, usually a refuge of idle conversation and shared sandwiches, had transformed into a stage of whispered anticipation. Eyes darted between screens as a live video streamed from a shaky phone, its focus locked on Nora Bennett, standing silently by the entrance, with her suitcase beside her. The camera swayed slightly, capturing her quiet composure, the faint tremble in her hands as she adjusted the strap on her faded duffel bag. The steady breath she tried to make appear calm. In the background, a smirk crossed Janine's face, the library manager who had expertly orchestrated much of the day's humiliation. The group chat buzzing in the hands of several staff members was thick with snide remarks and giggles. The cruel entertainment feeding off Nora's vulnerability. Look at her, whispered Jenna, her voice sharp with disdain. Our little dreamer, finally leaving the lonely library nest. A ripple of laughter followed, yet Nora's gaze was steady. She imagined none of this would matter once she was gone, that what awaited her beyond the town limits was an opportunity they could only ridicule because they didn't understand it. But then came the cruelest moment. From behind the phone camera, a voice, laughing, cutting, held up a plastic bingo chip, bright red and plastic flawless, offering it like a twisted trophy. Here, Nora, someone jeered. Take this souvenir. Maybe it'll bring you luck in Boston. The laughter swelled, invading the space around her like a cold wave. Her throat tightened painfully, tears threatening to spill, despite the steady mask she wore. The camera caught every second, the forced smile, the brief blink in which her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the faint tremor in her fingers clutching the suitcase handle tighter, as if tethering her to a sliver of resolve. No one in the room took the mockery to heart. It was just another small joke at the expense of the quiet girl who dreamed too big. Yet beneath the surface, Nora felt something heavy settle, a crushing exposure of her hopes to the harsh light of their derision. Still, she refused to crumble. With a gentle, controlled breath, she toned toward the exit, every step deliberate, slow but determined. She felt their eyes burning into her back, felt the sting of silent judgment attempt to drag her down. But the sealed envelope nestled deep within her bag was a quiet promise, a fragile emblem of the possibility flickering urgently beneath the humiliation. Outside, the chill of the autumn air was a harsh contrast to the suffocating heat of the break room. She hailed the waiting bus, its engine rumbling softly in the crisp air. The city beyond the window blurred into streaks of gray and gold as the vehicle pulled away, carrying her away from the narrow, judgmental world she'd known. For a moment, a solitary tear escaped, tracing her cheek like a whispered secret. Yet her lips pressed into a firm line. No longer the timid girl they believed her to be, Nora breathed in the cold air and exhaled courage. Could any of the laughter reach her here? Could it touch the dreams she carried quietly but fiercely? Maybe not. Because sometimes, the first step toward change is simply holding on to hope when the whole world watches and laughs. Have you ever felt the weight of many eyes? Their judgment like a storm? How did you find the strength to step forward, even when it felt like everything was unraveling. The gentle rumble of the bus tires on asphalt was a steady rhythm underneath the quiet buzz of conversation and occasional city sounds outside. Nora sat by the window, the crisp autumn light casting a warm glow across her hands as she finally dared to unfold the sealed envelope she'd clutched tightly since that stinging moment in the break room. Her fingers trembled ever so slightly as she pulled out the creamy parchment. The words inside shimmering with an unexpected promise. "Dear Miss Bennet," she read aloud softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is with great pleasure that we offer you admission to the Graduate Conservation Seminar in Boston, along with a travel scholarship to cover your expenses. Your passion and dedication to rare book preservation deeply impressed our selection committee. We look forward to your participation." The paper seemed to pulse in her hands, a tangible symbol of everything she had dreamed for, layered in a reality she'd never dared to imagine so soon. For a long moment, the cacophony of self-doubt that had crowded her mind quieted, replaced by a swirling, fragile hope. Nearby, a silver-haired woman in a cozy tweed jacket glanced over with a gentle smile. "Exciting news?" she asked kindly, her eyes twinkling behind delicate glasses. Nora nodded, feeling suddenly bold enough to speak. "I'm surprised I was accepted. I wasn't sure if my application would even be considered." The woman's smile widened. "It seems your work and passion spoke louder than you think. I'm Ruth, retired conservator. I'll be the keynote speaker at the seminar. If you'd like, I'd be happy to offer some advice as you prepare." Nora blinked, the weight of this unexpected kindness sinking in. Over the next hours, she found herself rehearsing her presentation quietly, clutching a dog-eared notebook filled with notes and sketches, while Ruth listened thoughtfully. The retired conservator's advice was practical, yet encouraging. "Remember, the value of this work isn't just in technique, but in honoring the stories these books carry. Never underestimate the strength of your quiet dedication." As the bus curved through Boston city streets, Nora absorbed every word. Ruth's presence was like a lighthouse in a storm, guiding, steady, and warm. Then came the revelation that felt almost too good to be true. "I'll be speaking before the panel you'll present to. If you impress, doors will open. And don't forget, the quiet ones often hold the most resilience." Nora's heart pounded with a blend of anticipation and nerves. The sleepless nights, the tiny victories against skepticism, they all veered toward this moment. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but suddenly the path seemed less lonely. With Ruth's encouragement resonating in her mind, Nora felt the flickering ember inside her catch flame. This seminar wasn't merely an event, it was the turning point she'd been fighting to reach. A chance to show the world what she was truly capable of. Have you ever met someone who believed in you before you believed in yourself? How did their faith shape your journey forward? The seminar hall buzzed softly with hushed conversations and the faint rustle of paper as attendees settled into their seats, the polished wooden floor gleaming under the warm glow of the overhead lights. Nora sat toward the front, her heart thudding high in her chest, but her hands steady. The worn notebook she'd cradled throughout her journey lay open on her lap, filled with notes, sketches, and fragments of quiet hope. Ruth, the graceful woman who had become both mentor and unexpected ally during the bus ride, sat beside her, radiant with kind encouragement. When the moderator announced Ruth as the keynote speaker, the room grew still in anticipation. As Ruth approached the podium, her voice carried a confidence born from years of dedication, and as she spoke, Nora felt a gentle warmth spread through the room. Then came the moment that would change everything. Ruth paused, scanning the audience until her eyes met Nora's. A soft smile spread over her face. "There is a young woman here today," Ruth began, her tone unwavering and sincere, "whose passion for rare book conservation has inspired not only me, but the entire selection committee. Nora Bennett's dedication and knowledge have earned her a unique opportunity. She has been recommended for a special project that will allow her to work alongside our experts in preserving some of the nation's most treasured literary artifacts. A ripple of surprised murmurs swept through the hall. Eyes turned toward Nora, who felt every head like a spotlight, yet instead of fear, a fierce swell of pride climbed in her chest. The undercurrent of doubt, the invisible weight of years of dismissal, all seemed to melt beneath Ruth's genuine endorsement. As the seminar continued, Nora answered questions with quiet clarity, her insights reaching beyond technical details into the very heart of preserving history and stories. With every step she took, her voice grew stronger, her composure steadier. Whispered conversations turned to open admiration. The narrative of a timid, overlooked woman was swiftly rewritten into that of a rising expert whose humility only deepened her brilliance. Afterward, as attendees mingled, Ruth introduced Nora to the panelists and key figures attending the conference. Cameras discreetly caught moments of their exchange, and soon snippets of Ruth's glowing introduction and Nora's poised responses began to surface online. The seminar's social feeds buzzed with fresh excitement, the story of Nora's transformation sparking likes, shares, and comments from curious enthusiasts and professionals alike. For the first time, Nora wasn't just the quiet library assistant from a small town. She was a respected voice in her field, her reputation unfolding in real time across screens and conversations, far beyond what she had imagined. Ruth leaned close during a brief lull. "You've changed the story, Nora. This is just the beginning." Nora exhaled slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of her notebook. She thought back to the sneers and snickers at her old library, to Janine's cruel mockery, to the sting of doubt that nearly overwhelmed her. Now standing within the heart of this distinguished seminar, she realized that strength born in humility could move mountains. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's belief in you shifted everything? How did it inspire you to embrace your own quiet power? The bright flicker of the TV screen illuminated the cramped break room as Nora watched, a quiet ripple running through her chest. The local news segment had been playing for the past few minutes, and there she was, her face framed warmly as the anchor detailed her award-winning conservation project, highlighting the Boston seminar that had transformed her life. The community eyes that once dismissed her were now watching, riveted by her success. Around her, the library staff shifted uncomfortably. Janine, the manager who had mocked her openly not long ago, sat stiffly, the smile on her lips forced and brittle. She cleared her throat and tapped on her phone before finally looking up and issuing a public, carefully worded congratulations. "Nora's achievement makes us proud," Janine said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge, but not quite touched by genuine warmth. From the corner, whispers fluttered like restless birds. The same co-workers who had once snickered and whispered about Nora's little getaway now approached her hesitantly by the shelves, seeking advice and ideas for new library programs. Their tone suddenly respectful, their eyes searching for the Nora they'd underestimated for too long. Nora met their gazes without bitterness. Instead, a quiet strength steadied her. She remembered every smirk, every mocking laugh, and knew she owed her calm not to revenge, but to the courage she'd cultivated quietly over the months. Later that evening, the sharp click of her apartment door echoed slightly as Nora stood face to face with her brother, Ezra. His usual sardonic grin was gone, replaced by a complicated mix of surprise, grudging respect, and something like regret. "I saw the news," he said, voice low. "Didn't think you had it in you." Nora's eyes held his unwaveringly. "Neither did you," she replied softly but firmly. "But it's not about what others think. It's about standing up for what matters to you, no matter how small or quiet the voice is." Ezra shifted, the years of doubt and dismissal hanging unspoken between them. "Guess I was wrong." She nodded. "Maybe it's time you see me for who I am, not who you want me to be." In that moment, Nora reclaimed more than her dignity. She reclaimed her story. She had grown from the timid assistant people overlooked into a woman who could hold her own with grace and conviction. The triumph wasn't just in titles or accolades. It was in the steadfast pursuit of her dreams, in the way she now carried herself with newfound confidence. The next day, As the sun dipped low over the Wisconsin streets, Nora walked into the library with a steady step and a calm smile. She greeted her coworkers warmly and shared ideas candidly, her voice no longer shrinking, but resonant and assured. The space that once felt confining now held potential. Her journey, once dismissed as a mere fantasy, was a vivid testament to quiet resolve turning into undeniable strength. When have you spoken up to reclaim your worth, turning doubt into fuel for your growth? How did standing firm change the way others saw you, and most importantly, how you saw yourself? The seminar hall buzzed softly with hushed conversations and the faint rustle of paper as attendees settled into their seats, the polished wooden floor gleaming under the warm glow of the overhead lights. Nora sat toward the front, her heart thudding high in her chest, but her hands steady. The worn notebook she'd cradled throughout her journey lay open on her lap, filled with notes, sketches, and fragments of quiet hope. Ruth, the graceful woman who had become both mentor and unexpected ally during the bus ride, sat beside her, radiant with kind encouragement. When the moderator announced Ruth as the keynote speaker, the room grew still in anticipation. As Ruth approached the podium, her voice carried a confidence born from years of dedication, and as she spoke, Nora felt a gentle warmth spread through the room. Then came the moment that would change everything. Ruth paused, scanning the audience until her eyes met Nora's. A soft smile spread over her face. "There is a young woman here today," Ruth began, her tone unwavering and sincere, "whose passion for rare book conservation has inspired not only me, but the entire selection committee. Nora Bennett's dedication and knowledge have earned her a unique opportunity. She has been recommended for a special project that will allow her to work alongside our experts in preserving some of the nation's most treasured literary artifacts." A ripple of surprised murmurs swept through the hall. Eyes turned toward Nora, who felt every head like a spotlight. Yet instead of fear, a fierce swell of pride climbed in her chest. The undercurrent of doubt, the invisible weight of years of dismissal, all seemed to melt beneath Ruth's genuine endorsement. As the seminar continued, Nora answered questions with quiet clarity, her insights reaching beyond technical details into the very heart of preserving history and stories. With every step she took, her voice grew stronger, her composure steadier. Whispered conversations turned to open admiration. The narrative of a timid, overlooked woman was swiftly rewritten into that of a rising expert whose humility only deepened her brilliance. Afterward, as attendees mingled, Ruth introduced Nora to the panelists and key figures attending the conference. Cameras discreetly caught moments of their exchange, and soon, snippets of Ruth's glowing introduction and Nora's poised responses began to surface online. The seminar's social feeds buzzed with fresh excitement. The story of Nora's transformation sparking likes, shares, and comments from curious enthusiasts and professionals alike. For the first time, Nora wasn't just the quiet library assistant from a small town. She was a respected voice in her field, her reputation unfolding in real time across screens and conversations far beyond what she had imagined. Ruth leaned close during a brief lull. "You've changed the story, Nora. This is just the beginning." Nora exhaled slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of her notebook. She thought back to the sneers and snickers at her old library, to Janine's cruel mockery, to the sting of doubt that nearly overwhelmed her. Now, standing within the heart of this distinguished seminar, she realized that strength born in humility could move mountains. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's belief in you shifted everything? How did it inspire you to embrace your own quiet power?